All right, we are live
Great.
and should be working. All righty. Well, thanks for joining me today, Cecil, to hop on and talk about confession and the backstory and how it's impacting and everything. But before we jump into why you go to weekly confession and the whole story, can you step back and just give us a little bit of a picture of who's Cecil Fuselier and that picture of the man and um, introduce yourself a little bit. So
I'd be happy to, and thank you, Christopher. It's really a pleasure and an honor for me to be able to take the time with you. My name is Cecil Fuselier, and thank you for pronouncing it correctly because it is hard for some people to do. I just turned 76 years old. I'm a single man, single celibate man, and no children. And I'm a retired clinical pharmacist. I worked for years teaching in medical and pharmacy schools, and then worked for the couple of major drug companies in the research divisions, the medical affairs divisions. I retired in 2008 after a wonderful career. I loved every minute of it, but I still felt I took an early retirement at 62 rather than 65 because I was so blessed with what I felt the Lord had sent me with good health to be able to go into another dominion of our lives and being able to enjoy the fruits of it. So in 2008, I stepped away from being a clinical pharmacist at the doctorate level, and it took 6 months where I really didn't do anything. I was trying to find what retirement was all about.
Yeah.
And then I realized that I've had a passion in my life for 40 years, and that's taking pictures as a photographer. And so this gave me the leisure time to be able to travel internationally and just do photography. And then somebody once wanted to buy one of my pictures. I thought that was unusual. They said, why don't you turn professional? Why don't you open up your own professional photography studio, if you will? And I never really thought about that, but I went ahead and redefined my life as a photographer.
Wow.
And somebody once told me, they said, Cecil, you've done such a good job at opening up a new chapter in your life once you retire. And I said, well, let me give you a really correction to what you just said. There's a really important correction. It's not a new chapter in my life. It's a new book. Title. What I'm doing now has nothing to do with what it is as a photographer. So I'm proud of the book that I closed, really proud of all the chapters in that book. And I'm really having fun and proud and enjoying being a full-time photographer. Hobbies that I have, I guess maybe I'm one of the fortunate people, or misfortunate or unfortunate people. My enjoyment of my hobby is my photography.
Right.
For tax purposes, the word hobby is not something you want to use with
right.
Because it's hard to get tax deductions on a hobby. And so I take it very seriously, having my own studio, etc. And so I guess I have to compare. If I get bored, and boredom does creep into our lives, I pick up my camera, I go walking in the woods here in South Louisiana and find something to shoot.
Yeah.
And I'm always looking for something that most people will walk by, not even give it a second glance. An old boot in the mud, which I find a lot of character. I shoot it, take it into my post-production laboratory here at home in my office, and then I turn it into something that's wall-worthy for either your home or your office as a character piece.
That's neat.
So I guess I could say that I camp a lot, so that's probably a hobby.
Yeah.
I do some rustic camping in tents, and I begin to more and more enjoy the cabin camping. As Christopher knows, we lost my sister Christmas Day, and she loved camping, but her idea of roughing it out was going to a major hotel and leaving a window open, and that was her way of really roughing it out. Camping. She's a wonderful lady.
Love it.
And so I'm a cradle Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
Cradle Catholic, and I share some of the challenges that other cradle Catholics have.
Mm-hmm.
In that, coming from a very Orthodox parish when I was growing up, uh, when I came to college, I found a way to drift because I didn't have anybody on my back for all of the sacraments and all. So the short of the story is I drifted. I never left.
Kind of a revert almost, or
I had a reversion
yeah.
later, but I drifted from the church. It's harder for me to say I left the church because people leave the church for anger reasons, for divorce reasons, for
Mm-hmm.
none of that applied to me. I just got lazy. Child of the
Yeah.
60s, child of the 60s. Steppenwolf was important in my life. The music was important in my life. I was finding myself as
Yeah.
my generation was doing. And I didn't have any time for church. I didn't have any time for
Mm.
Mass. I didn't have any time for Mass. I didn't have any time for confession. And so then I started creating a confession of my own, which was not sacramental confession. So
Right.
I drifted, I drifted and became a smorgasbord Catholic, as we say.
Yeah.
I
Cafeteria.
created, yeah, I created a Catholicism of convenience, which was so easy, so fun. I could do what I wanted to do. I uh, I liked it, and
Mm.
gravitate towards what we like. And
Right.
then for about 10 years ago, I had my St. Paul moment. I was asked to be a sponsor for at RCIA for a Catholic that was coming into the faith. She was the wife of a good friend of mine, and she respected me for whatever reasons. She
Mm.
knew I was Roman Catholic. So she asked me to be her sponsor. And I said, well, sure, I can be your sponsor. I'm a Catholic. And so I started going to RCIA with her. Now, granted, I had not been close to the faith for 20 years.
Wow.
And going through RCIA, I came to this rude awakening. What am I doing? I can't be this lady's sponsor. I'm not even a good Catholic. I'm not following the Catholic catechism. I'm not even following canon law.
Yeah.
And I went to the pastor of the church and I told him about that. And I said, I'm ready to make a general confession. I want to come back to the faith. And he gave me a bunch of books to read on how to examine my conscience. And I was doing it, Krista. And then I went to him and I said, I can't do this. I said, Father, the more I go into the books that you read, the more of a sinner I have found out that I am.
Yeah.
And I'm just not worthy. He said, then you're doing it right. Correctly. So we worked through that before Easter when she was going to be confirmed in the faith. I made my general confession, which was very difficult. It took me a couple of hours
Yeah.
in a faithful confession. And that was 10 years ago. And now I became a Sunday Catholic.
Yeah.
It was so nice, I mean, I was following Mass. I was going to
Going every
confession.
Sunday.
Yeah, and we'll get into confession a little bit later. But I love being being reverted back to Catholicism, and I thought it was a fantastic job. I was going to Mass. I wasn't missing Mass. I wasn't breaking the 10 big ones.
Right.
And that's how I used to examine my conscience, by the way. It's just merely the 10 commandments and said, I'm good to go. I haven't
Didn't kill anybody. Didn't. Yeah.
I'm good to go. And
Right. Well, that brings us into our next question and really diving into why do you go to weekly confession and what's the story there? So the first question here is, when did you start going to weekly confession, Cecil?
Great question, because I had two watershed moments.
Mm-hmm.
Coming back to the church 10 years ago. My next big watershed moment was when you called me to become part of Men Living for Greatness, the inner circle. And I didn't know who you were.
Mm-hmm.
The Holy Spirit began to adjust my rudder. He took the rudder out of my hands. And so when I joined Men Living for Greatness in the inner circle,
Mm-hmm.
something really interesting was asked by you to many people, including me, how often do you go to confession? I thought it was the silliest question I had ever heard. I really did.
Yeah.
Well, I thought, Christopher, that's so easy. I go to confession when I feel I'm not in a state of grace.
Yeah.
So when I fall mortally, I go to confession and I'm absolved and everything's good. So to answer the question, I told you, you don't have a box for me to check on the answer to that question.
Yeah.
I said, I go to confession maybe once a month, maybe once every 3 months.
Right.
It depends on when I'm doing my interpretive examen and I feel that I've fallen mortally, that I know I can't approach the Eucharistic table without the benefits of sacramental confession. Then you introduced me to this concept of weekly confession. And I thought, that's absurd. How will I find a priest, a confessor, that's going to welcome me coming to confession every week?
Right. That doesn't think I'm nuts.
And I'm thinking he's going to say, Cecil, I don't have time for this. You know,
Right.
the penitential prayer at the beginning of Mass absolves us of those sins, the venial part of our lives. And so I thought, well, I'm going to trust Christopher in his direction, in his guidance, and I'm going to choose a confessor and start going. And I started going to weekly confession. And fortunately, I chose somebody who said, Cecil, I think it's a wonderful thing. I wouldn't come any more often, frequent than weekly. But he said, weekly's good. I said, well, Father, I need to find out why I come weekly. Cecil needs to find out why he comes weekly and how can weekly change his life. And I'm sure you're going to maybe ask me questions on how it's changed my life.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you started going weekly how many years ago?
About three. About 3
years.
Yeah, it took, because I've been with you 3 years, and it took you 6 months to sink into my head. Somewhere between 2.5 and 3 years.
Right. Yeah.
Has been the weekly confession.
And before that, you're probably, like you said, maybe once a month, maybe every 3 months. Just really, it varied. It wasn't on any type of regularity.
No, it wasn't. And you know why? I was missing, and I've talked to you about this, and I've talked to our brothers. I was missing being able to identify the graces that we receive in weekly confession.
Right.
Because I was only looking for this grace. The prayer of absolution was what I was thinking was and it is the major part of our sacramental confession. I agree with that. But when you look around in the confessional at what's happening with the graces that you're getting, then it became easier, Christopher, not easier, meaningful, needed, wanted, crucially needed, and now I'm constantly amazed. It goes back to when we were 12 and 13 and going to confession. When we'd come out, the leaves were greener, the air smelled sweeter, the burden was off your chest.
Yeah.
You knew that you could go to Mass the next day with your family and approach the communion rail without a problem. And so I didn't recognize these as graces until I became part of the inner circle, and all of the brothers have been teaching me how to be an everyday Catholic. Going from a Catholic to an everyday Catholic is so rewarding.
And it's really under that deeper understanding too of why does St. Francis de Sales encourage it for people like you and me to go weekly, right? And St. Jose Maria Escrivo goes weekly. I think some people say Mother Teresa went daily, and JP2 went daily. Why would people go this frequently? They're not in mortal sin, right? All these saints. And so that beautifulness of it being a sacrament of deeper conversion and ongoing sanctification, and not just a sacrament of resurrection.
And I didn't know that, Christopher.
Yeah.
And you know how I found that out? Was another gift that Men Living for Greatness Inner Circle brought to my table that I didn't think it would. And that is, and it is linked to confession, that is my failure of being a spiritual reader.
Mm,
I only read medical stuff because that was my job.
right.
I only read photography stuff because that was my passion.
Yeah.
But as you know, I never did do enjoyment spiritual reading. And so when you directed me towards these reading things, then I began to read about weekly confession.
Yeah.
It opened up what weekly confession is to me.
Yeah.
It's almost like a really slow blooming flower.
Yeah.
It'll take forever to have those petals just display who they are. It's still unfolding.
Right.
It will until the journey is over.
Well, and that takes us to our next question, which are, what are the main differences you've noticed about going whenever you felt you're in the state of mortal sin, and now you go weekly, and with not just when you feel like it or when you're in mortal sin, but you actually have this regularity of receiving the sacrament every weekend now. What would you how would you describe the main differences that you experience?
It affected my life and my view on life and my view on people.
Ah,
I'm more tolerant. I become more empathetic. I become more forgiving
hmm,
because I begin to learn that it's just not the mortal areas that our journey is made better. It's the pavers, the smaller sins that you begin to recognize in your life that really are major,
yeah,
but we pass them off as minor.
right,
I won't. There's a story that I've told to Christopher about how I really came to grips with who I was in a grocery store. You know, and I was unkind to a person by body language, nothing more than body language. And and I realized that I was being unkind to this person when she turned to me and apologized for something. And then I thought, I really was harmful to that lady by just being short with her and not having patience. I was lacking the virtue of patience. And so going to frequent confession continuously reminds me that we have to concentrate on the virtues, because behind every sin is the failure of a virtue on our part.
right,
And I begin to learn that. And um, the time that we have is too short for me to go into all of the benefits that I've found
yeah,
through weekly confession, and even becoming closer to my confessor from the standpoint of not letting things go long times. So I'm hoping that kind of addresses what you're talking about, but it's changed my life. It's made me more appreciative of life. It's made me enjoy being an everyday Catholic more.
mm,
It's made me enjoy being an everyday Catholic even more, because I feel, and I'm a sinner. We fall. I do.
yeah.
I
And
do.
does it did it open your eyes to how God wants us to imitate Him in the middle of, you know, examining our hearts on that daily basis, knowing, was I a good imitation of Christ today, or was I really lack the love of Christ, the charity, the patience, where He's trying to work on me, right? Because He wants to live in me. And I feel like weekly confession gives that rhythm to where He can increase and we can decrease, and it helps us do that examination.
Without a doubt. And one of the things before weekly confession, think of my life as a big ceramic vase. Okay.
Okay.
Big ceramic vase. It has no handles, but
Uh,
I can grab onto it and hold it.
uh-huh.
But then when I start going through the examination of conscience, there appears a petroleum layer that's being placed, and I can't hold it. It's slipping through my hands. It's just something that I can't hold on to. I'm looking for the handles, and it's because my spiritual life is slipping away from me, and I'm not being Christ-like as best that I can.
Yeah.
I'm not walking the path as good as I can. And then when I go to frequent confession, I have a better handle on my life, so that I can see my faults more clearly, because seeing my faults is as important as acknowledging my faults.
Right. Even realizing there's a problem.
Absolutely, and it's humbling. It's humbling on our Saturday conference calls to humble myself before other Catholic men that I trust.
Yeah.
I have complete trust, because we're all walking the same journey. And weekly confession is a pivotal point in many of our conversations.
Yeah.
So of all the changes that have been occurring in my life for the past 10 years, more frequently for the past 3 years, has been that I've been encouraged, supported, and forgiven in my journey when it's not perfect. But I know now how to better make it better. We
Yeah.
strive for perfection. And I'm a perfectionist. As a photographer, everything to be perfect on that portrait image that I take of you. So I'm a perfectionist. But I've learned to be humble in the fact that perfection is only something you strive for.
Well, you bring up a good point about not just letting something become stale, right? So here, just wanted to have you touch on, how do you prepare to make a fruitful weekly confession, and what keeps you from just making it routine, so that it's not, so that you're just confessing the same 3 things week after week and you're not actually making any progress? How do you prepare well so it's fruitful, and so that it's not just, I go weekly, confess the same thing, don't feel bad about it, not making progress for the past 5 years? So what do you do there, Cecil?
It's hard.
Mm-hmm.
I'll add this. It's painful. It's painful, and I say it with a bit of humor, but the painfulness of it is when I do an examen of conscience and I dig deep into what an examen is all about, because that's where the pain comes in. That's when I have to self-admit that this is not Christ-like. My behavior, my attitude, whatever the case may be. And I don't like looking at that part of me. I don't like being with that part of me.
Yeah.
So when I do an evening examen, I have to shut everything out in order to be able to enter that place that is painful, gut-wrenching, and prepare myself for the next day's confession in the sacramental confession to describe that and be able to bring it up again, look at it, confess it with a wonderful confessor. And then the prayer of absolution absolutely means more to me than anything. So getting back to your question, how do I prepare for it? It's being in a quiet solitude place. It requires 100% honesty.
Yeah.
It requires me looking at the ugly part of my daily life, or whatever the case may be, and being in that place. I want to say in that painful place, but it's a good painful place, if that makes any sense at all.
It's the divine surgeon. He's trying to change our hearts.
That's it. And pain is an integral part of redemption. I mean, we have to really feel the pain in order to feel the redemption from. We have to acknowledge that burden on our shoulders, right, so that it can be lifted, and we'll know that it's gone. We'll never know it's gone if we never feel it. then how can you know something's going if you never felt it? But when you feel the pain, the burden of sin, and then it's relieved from you, that's when you're 2 feet off the ground when you walk out of the confession.
I love it. I love it. Now, one other part is weekly confession can seem like quite the commitment, but also people's lives are busy, and yours is as well. What sacrifices have you had to make to prioritize weekly confession?
That's great. I had to sacrifice the lazy time.
Hmm.
Lazy time is hard to give up. Mindless time is hard to give up. And my weekly confession is on Saturday, as you know, shortly after we finish our conference call. And
Right.
that's my routine. That's been my routine. So the sacrifices that I had to make was you got a job to do. You know, if it's not scheduled, it doesn't get done, as we've
Yeah.
said many times. So it's on my schedule. I've had to sacrifice my selfish time, and that selfish time may be watching mindless TV or
Yeah.
whatever, you know, uh, because going to confession requires action,
Yeah.
requires energy. Um, the other sacrifices that I've had to make is I didn't want to be in pain.
Embracing the
Yeah,
transformation process.
you know. So I'm famous for being able to put blinders on
Mm.
and just focus on my own pleasures and not on the other things. So the sacrifice that I had to make is not that I had to tell the 5 kids, that I can't go play ball with them, or the wife, honey, do jobs. Those were the sacrifices that a lot of men have to make to get into a routine of spirituality that is very singular in its nature, pretty much singular in its nature. So I had to look at the sacrifices that I had to make, and it was really self-indulgence.
Mm.
Self-indulgence from the exam the night before. Yeah, the TV show I wanted to watch, or yeah, so and so was going out to get a pizza, and they called me and no, I have something to do tonight.
Mm.
So that's a little bit of a sacrifice that may sound kind of absurd to some people, but when you're in total control of your own life, then it's sometimes harder. Somebody who's married, it may not be hard because the wife said she wants me to do that. So I guess I better do it to keep the peace in the house. I mean, people make sacrifices within their own internal compartment. But when you're single, I'm in control. So it would be easy for me to say I'm going to get pizza and a beer with friends.
Well, I think what's so neat about what you just said is you're not leaving it as, if I don't have anything else to do, I'll do my examen. And if I don't have anything else to do, I'll go to confession on Saturday.
Very
You,
well.
you prioritize it. It's on your calendar that this is when you do it. And it's actually an encounter where you're going to sit down with our Lord, right? And then you prioritize it as a real meeting and as something that matters, that will override something else, opposed to it's the thing that will absolutely get bumped if anything comes up.
The intentionality of confession was very hard to deal with in COVID-19.
Mm.
From the standpoint that there was a time in our lives, probably all of our lives, I had to search for a church that was having confession.
Mm.
Many abandoned the confessional thing, the bishops made certain allowances for all of us. And so we were having confession outside, but I had to get on the internet to find out the local parishes, who's having confession, when are they having it.
Right.
And COVID-19 was really a challenge that was sent to us for several reasons. And that was for me to validate that confession is an intentional thing.
Yeah.
It's not a happenstance thing. And if
Yeah.
it's not intentional, then it's not a sacrifice. The greater the intention, the greater the sacrifice, the greater the reward. And so to try to be intentional in my daily habits, I'm painting myself as maybe perfect person, and I'm not. I don't want to give that impression, but I'm learning how to be better, and that's as important as being better.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's because the confession is really a school, right? Where our Lord is teaching us and revealing new things to us and refining us. It's it's the school of love, but
Yeah.
also the school of deeper self-knowledge, deeper humility. And
There's two places that I zone out completely as of the past 3 years. Two places in my spiritual life that I completely zone out. The first thing is in the confessional. When the hands go up for the absolution prayer, I'm completely zoned out. I am so in the moment.
mm,
It's tearful. The second thing is at the epiclesis.
mm,
The epiclesis to me is something that I want to be in that church by myself. And so I completely zone everybody out because there's no greater thing happening than the miracle of the Holy Spirit coming down at that point of the celebrant's sacrifice of the Mass. The other times I can allow people around me, etc., but those are the two times that I can't.
really touch you.
And when I shoot a priest's first Mass, I was talking to the bishop one time and I said, Bishop, I'm going to shoot this first Mass, but I'm going to have to go back to Mass again.
Mm-hmm.
And why? I said, because when the epiclesis occurs, I'm shooting for that priest's mother.
Mm.
I'm not concentrating on what's going on at the table. I want to make sure that the major elevation is not hiding his face.
Right.
So Mama sees that. And I tell the priest before I shoot it, you can do whatever you want for the rest of your priestly life. But if you can only remember in your first Mass on the major elevation that you hold it up high so that I can shoot it from that.
Get your face.
So it's technical. It's technical.
Right.
So I was talking to the bishop and I said, so I haven't been to Mass. And he said, oh, Cecil, you have. But for my own thing, people might think that's extreme. But I'm not concentrating on what's going on at the altar in the sacrifice. I'm concentrating on a job that I'm doing. Yeah. And I know most people would laugh at that. Most people would think, well, he's too serious about it. Well, I do take it serious.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much, Cecil, for sharing that story. And hopefully it gives a little bit of a background of why somebody would go to weekly confession, how it's impacted your life, and hopefully be an encouragement or at least thought-provoking to our brothers who are watching this. So thank you so much, Cecil.
Well, thank you. And I have just one request.
Yeah.
That you and my other brothers continue to pray for me as I pray for you, for the intentions that I'm aware of and the intentions that I'm not aware of. And so if we do that for one another, the road is a little bit more smooth.
Absolutely. You can count on that.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we'll see you later, Cecil. God bless.
God bless you. Thank you.